Hi everyone, it's Joe Veneri, the host of Fit Insider, the show where I talk with the entrepreneurs, executives, and investors who are redefining the business of fitness and wellness. Today I'm joined by Eric Min, co-founder and CEO of Zwift, a fitness company born out of gaming where users ride and run in virtual worlds. In this episode, Eric shares the key insights that led him to start Zwift. We discuss the company's plan to launch a smart bike and other connected equipment, including a rower. And Eric explains why Zwift hopes to make virtual cycling an Olympic sport. Let's get into it. A quick reminder before we get into today's show. Every Tuesday, we send a weekly newsletter filled with insights and analysis on the business of fitness and wellness. Join other decision makers and industry operators by subscribing at insider.fit.co. Hi, Eric. Welcome to Fit Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Looking forward to today's conversation. I mentioned this offline, definitely someone that folks wanted to hear from. So I think a lot of listeners will be familiar with Zwift. But for anyone who's not, can you just introduce yourself at a high level and just tell us about the Zwift?
Yeah, well, I am a big cycling enthusiast, have been for many, many years since I was a young teenager. And here I am, 30 years later, doing what I love and passionate about, and trying to encourage other people to kind of share in the passion that I have through this business that we've co-founded called Zwift.
Yeah. And so, sorry to cut you off there. How long has it even been now? 2014-ish?
Yes, we launched in September 2014. So the idea was born in November 2013. We set up shop in January, and in September, we were doing a big global launch. So it was pretty fast and furious in the beginning. And part of that was because I had some great, partners and co-founders, and we were able to accelerate, the launch of the business. I think a lot of that had to do with us feeling really confident about what we were building.
Yeah. And going back to starting the business, I know the kind of aha moment or insight that led you to this. You mentioned you love cycling. You've been in the sport, but maybe not getting to do it as much as you wanted to. There's this social aspect of going out on group rides. I'm someone who kind of came to it being involved in triathlon. So again, spending hours and hours on the bike, but getting there, getting set up, getting a flat tire, all those things that go into the experience, making the jump from, hey, I love cycling and I'd like to create something social and maybe gamified. How did you start to create or even imagine these virtual worlds, and what goes into building them?
Yeah, so I've been a cyclist for a long time, competitive when I was younger. My whole life, it revolves around something to do with cycling. So it's a big part of my DNA. And so while living in London, it was just a challenge for me to get out, find that 1 hour. It wasn't even worth it. So I was confined to a lot of indoor riding. And so I was just literally trying all the different content that was out there, and have been doing this for many, many years. If you're a cyclist, you have to do indoor training, right? To augment the fact that you can't get out due to snow or shortened days. So it's something I've been doing for many years, but let's say not enthusiastically.
Sure.
Right. And, I found myself riding indoors even in the summertime, because it wasn't even about the snow. I just didn't want to deal with the traffic, and I didn't have much time. So it was really about convenience factor. So as I was coming off my last startup, I started to think about, let me look at all sorts of opportunities that are out there. In fact, the last thing I wanted to do with anything with cycling is just too close to your passion. And sometimes that's when things can go wrong. But this one felt right, because I suspect that I wasn't the only one who was just really short on time and busy lives, didn't have access to good roads, missed my friends in New York, right? I didn't have the social network that I used to have in New York City around Central Park. I didn't have that in London. So trying to recreate all these things was just incredibly difficult to do in the real world. So I started to look at what are all the different content options just to satisfy my own needs. And I came across, to their full credit, a program called Tour de Giro, which doesn't exist anymore. But, I've been playing with CompuTrainer. I don't know how far back you go with triathlons, but CompuTrainer was de facto indoor cycling,
Sure.
hardware and software. But the experience largely was with a bot. There was this concept of playing with other people, but largely, in the same room. And the graphical experience wasn't there. But there was a company called Tour de Giro, and it was a 3D version. It was an MMO, and I got stuck in these little races of like 20 people, and I got sucked in. It wasn't even about the quality of the graphics. It was me convincing myself I was there with other like real people. And that was the light bulb moment. Like, my God, like I got sucked into it with like just a bunch of like 1980s pixels. Imagine if we can turn that into something more graphical, more modern, and instead of 10 people, why not thousands of people?
Sure.
And that was the aha moment back in November. I remember calling my co-founder and partner from my last business, saying, "Hey, what do you think of this idea? Like, what if we could make it easier for people to do all the things that we love?" And let's talk about cyclists for a moment, and just, if we can get to like the 70% of what we all love about outdoor cycling and bring it virtually, how cool would that be? And the whole company would be about just getting people to be more active. And he just loved the idea, the social impact that the business would have. And whether or not we can make money doing that was a sort of secondary. Like, this was something that no one was doing at scale. Like, people were doing it in small projects. But imagine if we could have millions of people doing this. We can create this whole virtual world, and from training to competition. And why stop with cycling? Why not go into running and rowing and all sorts of other sports that another thing that we thought early on was the social accountability. The reason why people show up for group rides or show up to gyms is because they want to make themselves accountable. What if we created that accountability all from the comfort of your home? And, and so this is, the business has evolved, but it all came from my experience with Tour de Giro, doing like a handful of races. I was like, that there's something there. People just have underinvested in that experience.
I think so many of those things you mentioned being important to why people start and continue their fitness journey or their cycling journey, whatever it is that they do to stay active. You mentioned the social aspect and community, the accountability, certainly the gamification. And now with Zwift, the way that at least I think about it, a lot of the people that I know that use it are kind of more serious athletes. They're cyclists and triathletes who are using this to supplement their training, or they're using it as their primary training source. Do you have a sense of like who the customer is, the main customer, and then how you broaden beyond these people who, they need to go down this path of like that fitness journey and experiencing all the great things that you talk about? So how do you broaden that base beyond the pure cyclists?
Yeah, so we do have the tippy end of the athletes, the World Tour cyclists to the top triathletes, top runners. They're all there, and it's important that they are on the platform because it gives validation for the platform, right? For the experience. But increasingly, the customers that we are bringing onto the platform are recreational cyclists. They identify themselves as cyclists. We haven't really and deliberately have tried to reach out to those who don't even own a bike, or who are sitting on a couch. Like, we're deliberately going after people who are into cycling, watch the Tour de France, or like to do gravel riding or mountain biking or triathlons, and many people who've never done any formal like training. So we're bringing more and more of those customers onto the platform. So it is already shifting. And, over time, we're going after then a much broader audience who are looking for fitness. And that is a huge opportunity there. But we're just carefully going down that pyramid of customers that we know are out there, who are looking for motivation, who are looking for their tribe, and who are looking to form a habit of exercising regularly, and Zwift being part of that solution.
Yeah, and we mentioned those other pieces being the community, the socializing, gamification. I think a lot of those, especially now as we shift to this world where at-home exercise is so buzzy and all the different products that may exist. How do those elements, the community, socializing, gamification, differ within Zwift than maybe people typically see them in some of these other products that might exist?
Yeah, I think we're in that sense more of a platform than other products that are out there. Right? We allow the community to be creative on the platform. We allow them to have an identity. We allow them to create content on the platform. That's not the case with other, great products out there, Peloton or Tonal or Hydro. Customers don't get to create content and build sub communities with visual identity, right? Yeah, those are all things that we do at Zwift that makes us unique. It's more difficult, let's be clear, because we now have to manage a community, right? Whereas if it's an experience that's largely one directional, then it's highly curated and this is what you get. That's a very different approach. But we went down this path of we are so international to expect everyone to for starters, we are very international, but the product isn't completely internationalized for all the communities. So you need other platforms, whether it's Facebook or Reddit, and where people are creating their communities there and engaging, but the actual activity happens on Zwift. So that's, if I go back to our original thinking around the business, I would say we did not expect the power of the community would be so strong. But it's been great. It's been challenging too. The community can be pretty demanding. The hardest customers to serve are consumers, not the enterprise customers. I can tell you that because my business before we're dealing with, enterprise customers. Yes, it takes a long time to, close the sales, but once you close the sales, they're much stickier. Whereas consumers have so many choices.
Right. And, in this case, it's a good problem to have, right? That you have consumers who are so passionate that they feel invested in the brand. In some cases, they feel like it's a part of their identity. You want to be in a position where they want to wear the logo and they want to be involved. But then when you are so invested, they feel like any decision that you make or don't make, impacts them much more directly. With that, when you look at some of the other companies, I had Mark Gainey on the show from Strava, and there was a time where I feel like both of you were kind of growing at this. Obviously, Strava's been around for a while, but growing at this trajectory, targeting kind of the same endurance audience. Was there ever a consideration like, let's grow this community, acquire a Strava or some other kind of social community, maybe work together to build this thing? Did that come up, or do you think about, building the community through acquisitions or other partnerships that way?
Yeah. I don't think I'm the only one who thinks that just, these two brands make so much sense, whether it's through cooperation, partnership, or through, some sort of amalgamation. And those conversations are really interesting. I have a lot of respect for Strava, what they've built. And, it's a very symbiotic relationship. I think their customers are largely outdoor customers. Our customers are largely indoor. And I think we, in some respect, add engagement, during months where they probably were less engaged in the past. And Strava is a really interesting source of, how you find out about Zwift through your own network. So it's perfect. And I think the relationship we have is great. And I think there are further opportunities for us to work together, whether that's product integration or activation. But yeah, Strava and Zwift, I would say, we know many of our customers, most of our customers are also Strava customers.
Yeah, that piece you mentioned, I wanted to touch on this later actually, but since you bring it up, the indoor-outdoor component, when you think about, obviously so many of your users are also doing activities outdoors, do you think, or how do you think about capturing that or building it in a way where that can filter into or center around the Zwift platform as well? So it's not just you're making the choice on a given day to use it or not to use it. It's capturing all that activity.
Yeah. We do have customers who use our product heavily over the winter. And when the weather turns nice and dry and long, the days are long, then they tend to go out more often. And so we have that seasonality, just like Strava has some seasonality as well. I think, we've probably done we could do a better job of explaining why Zwift should be part of the toolkit year round, because the weather isn't always perfect. You don't always have the time. You don't always get to do a race or ride with your friend. And I do think that Zwift can solve, those problems and make it super convenient to do that. So, is Zwift something that you could use year round? We believe so. And I think we should do a better job of making sure that customers are aware that that's the case. So yeah, I that is our goal. Our goal is to make Zwift relevant year round. It doesn't mean we have to compete with outdoor cycling or outdoor activity. We're simply competing with doing nothing, right? Sure.
And I think that's a big thing that goes back to like when you look at it, depending how you come to Zwift, if you're already a cyclist and you might have some of this equipment and you're already doing it, then there's way less friction to get started. It's just a matter of using the content and getting acclimated to the platform. Whereas if you're just somebody who's starting their fitness journey, there is a lot of friction up front, right? You have to learn about getting a bike and getting a trainer and setting it up. The obvious, what I'm kind of setting up there is you've mentioned pushing into hardware. That's been a focus. It was part of raising the $450 million round. I think it was last fall or summer. So as you think about making that move into hardware, what's the approach to the extent that, you can talk about it, what type of equipment might be in the pipeline and what maybe took you guys this long to get to the point where it's like, hey, this is going to become a pillar of the business?
Yeah, I think we are successful today because we didn't get into the hardware business from the get-go. But I think having said that, should we have, perhaps started that journey a little bit earlier? In hindsight, the answer is always yes. But we're looking at the long term, like big picture. I think a year or two, it doesn't make a difference in the grand scheme of things. But what we are trying to solve for is making it super easy for customers to understand what Zwift is, making it super easy to buy Zwift, and everything that you need to Zwift, and then making it super easy for you to use Zwift. And it's incredible how hard it is to do those three things, right, and how expensive it is to do those three things. And that is those three things that I just mentioned to you is the investment that we're making.
What does it even look like, on a day-to-day basis to think about? We're coming out, you're someone who has a passion for cycling, the vision of this company evolving over time, wanting to build that kind of exceptional content, right? That's a software business that you're going about getting out there, and then looking at all the ways that people are interacting with the brand, now evolving that vision into community and hardware, those various pieces that you talk about. What does that look like in terms of managing the teams and the company as this vision evolves over time?
Yeah, it's... we are 425 people. We're hiring 350 people this year.
Wow.
So we're making a huge investment because we think there are a lot of people out there who I think would enjoy this experience if it were easy to buy and easy to use. And that's really, what we need to solve for. And I'm talking about customers who may not be cyclists or hardcore cyclists, right? These are people who might have a bike, but they've never done any training. They've never done any competition, and everything is just so new to them. And they may not even have many friends who even Zwift. So simplicity is our focus. It's just making it very, very easy for people to get onboarded, for us to understand more about who you are so that we can serve you the right content. And if you segment the kind of customers we have dozens of segments of customers. And so they all want slightly different content. And I think over time, it's the Netflix strategy, right? Which is like you build a profile and it knows what you like. And, there's probably machine learning that is serving up all sorts of content. And this is sort of the direction that we're headed. I think the personalization is a buzzword, but it is so important because what I like and the next person like are different. It is what it is, right? And so I think that's just a huge opportunity, not just for Zwift, but all consumer-led products out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, going to be mandatory as you think about products, especially in the fitness space where you are competing. It's not that you're competing with other products in the fitness space. You're competing with doing nothing, as you mentioned. And so the more sticky you can make that product, personalization being part of that is certainly important. Another question.
By the way, doing nothing is really easy.
Oh, of course. And that's the thing about it. So when you think about Zwift, what's most interesting, I think, is a fitness company born out of gaming is so much different than a company that's born out of competition or training or so many of the other things that you think of as the traditional definition of fitness, right? And conditioning. So
fun is fast, right? Our campaign around fun is fast. We don't talk about training all that much. We don't talk about suffering. What we want to do is we want to entertain you, and the outcome is fitness.
Yeah. And I think we've kind of talked about it in the newsletter and some of the other conversation I've had is evolving into this, call it fitness 3.0, where fitness is a game. You see a lot of companies down this path of Zwift. Supernatural is like a VR game that's taking a different path. But creating these different, whether it's virtual worlds or gamified worlds, there are so many people, the disproportionate amount of people who don't work out at all. So coming up with things that might serve them, it's something I'm also passionate about, which it excites me about this conversation. On the hardware front, I think it may be an obvious thing that comes to my mind, and would just like to hear your thoughts on how maybe you process this. Why not go out and just acquire a company that's already doing hardware? Why bring this all in-house and undertake it from scratch?
I think because none of them are perfect match. Our aspirations are different. I think if you look at the manufacturers, our partners who are embedded in this business and hardware, they're really focused on the current core enthusiast market. And when we think about building products, we need to take a much broader approach than the kind of consumers we'll have. And that just doesn't fit with the DNA of some of these companies. That's just one. And the other is, many of these companies sell far more than just trainers, right? They sell outdoor products. And so it's complicated, and it's not a perfect match, but has that, come across our thoughts? Of course it has, right? But in the end, we think it's better to just start with a clean slate and just build a roadmap. We'll continue to work with our partners,
sure,
for a long time. Because I think the bottom line is that as an industry, we don't make enough. That's the problem, right? And so, I'm encouraging all of our partners to, keep manufacturing more, because I think we're more bullish about the future and the demand that's out there than they are. And that's natural, right? They're the ones who have to manufacture, have to carry the inventory and take the risk on inventory. So they're going to be more conservative than someone like Zwift. I think Zwift will take bigger bets about the size of the opportunity, and we will, augment and add to the supply of trainer hardware that you need to get into, to Zwift.
Yeah.
So what we like to think is we're just going to help grow the pie. Bring more people through the top of the funnel. Bring awareness of indoor cycling. I mean, we are by far the largest marketer of indoor cycling.
Yeah.
Right. And to that extent, I think all of our partners are benefiting from that, which they know. Right. So it's perfect. We're going to raise the size. We're going to grow the size of the pie, and we'll all benefit from that.
For sure. Yeah, and it's more people being physically active, whether that's cycling or running. You've mentioned rowing, which I want to touch on, but yeah, it's certainly everybody kind of wins as that market expands. On the content, as you move into hardware front, I think Zwift is a little bit more uniquely positioned than some other companies. When you look at connected fitness, if there's even a comparison to draw there, if we make that comparison, it's vertically integrated. And they're saying, we have our content, you use our hardware, you pay our subscription. Well, Zwift is already in a world where it's like, no, you use different hardware, you view it on whatever type of screen that you're going to view it on. How do you think about, as this evolves into a hardware business as well, is it going to be kind of hardware agnostic? Is it you're going to be able to display the content on different pieces of equipment that other companies might launch, or you want to keep it vertically integrated?
So we're going to remain an open platform. for the foreseeable future. Because at the end of the day, the more partners we have manufacturing more hardware, we're just going to grow faster. And so this goes back to like, we're just going to grow the pie together. And so we need to compete on innovation, and we don't need to shut out anyone. It's like Apple, right? Apple makes, we use Apple AirPods as a perfect example of someone who not only owns the platform, but are also making hardware accessories. And they let other partners, make all sorts of accessories. Where they win is the integration and the seamlessness and the trust that the brand gives to consumers when they said this is coming from Apple. And these are things that we should be able to benefit from. We have to build great products. It has to be a great experience. It has to be price competitive, and we have to deliver on the promise that our product will just work, right? This is otherwise, why are we even getting into this business at all?
When you think about right now, obviously there was this pandemic boom around at-home fitness equipment. At the same time, outdoor running, walking too was another huge kind of boom. And now there's two factions. The ones saying this is the future. Everything's going to kind of be done at home. It's more convenient. It's more personalized. And then there's this other group that's saying we can't wait to get back to the gym, to our cycling groups, to doing everything in some type of experimental, socializing way. How do you think about, and how do you, what do you say to people who say like, oh, there's this going to be a downturn of at-home exercise. The connected fitness market is kind of just oversaturated right now. What's your kind of thought process there and explanation to folks as you think about, obviously, the vision being many years into the future for what Zwift can do?
So, we believed in this thesis before the pandemic, that one of the industries that hasn't been disrupted, like many others, whether it's entertainment, whether it's gaming, video games, or whether it's food delivery or the way we consume products and retail, like the health and fitness and the wellness market is still like hasn't been innovated. And I see us, I see that whole industry innovating, and we're kind of at the beginning of that journey. So health and fitness definitely will get innovated and just like many other services, on demand from the home is what consumers will expect. Now, what's going to support that trend even stronger is the fact that many companies, especially in the tech world, like you're not going back to work 5 days a week in the office, right? You're going to spend more time at home, and we're going to create time for you to exercise. And you will always find time to do some sort of, fitness activity for an hour here or there. I mean, you have far more flexibility. So that's supporting the trend. And the other is that, what the pandemic did was simply accelerate the trend that we knew was going to happen. It just allowed people to try, exercise at home using all sorts of subscriptions, all sorts of content that's out there. Zwift including many others. And, I think many of them realize like this could work for me. So I think that's the way we look at it. Yes, I think there'll be a rush for people to want to go back and, to gyms. But I think what's going to win at the end of the day is convenience, right? And time management is so important for us. I do think the gym market will suffer long term. But this industry that we're talking about, the connected fitness from home, it's really, really nascent. It's the beginning, and it's a huge population out there, and so we're just scratching the surface. And companies like Zwift and Peloton, and Hydra, we're making big investments, big bets that this is going to be a new trend that will go on for decades.
Yeah, and a much needed one, right? Back to the point around we just need more people, moving and engaging in whatever type of activity they want to. So it's exciting to see all the different modalities out there.
Yeah.
As we get to the end of the conversation here, one of the things I wanted to talk about that's been a big push as well, talking about investments for Zwift, the focus on elite and professional events and athletes as a way into the broader market. You've done these virtual competitions, talked about Zwift being an Olympic sport. I think just recently, maybe as recent as yesterday, a new partnership with the International Olympic Committee around a virtual event series. So what's the approach there, the strategy behind these even Olympic level competitions?
Yeah, it's a playbook right out of Nike. Nike has done this extremely well, right? They invest heavily in athletes and competition. It positions their brand in a way that it creates this halo effect. And if you look at the most of their consumers, they're not like the elite athletes, right? It's the everyday consumer who wants a bit of that brand. And I think that's what we're doing. But what we're doing in the process is also creating a sport. And I think that's even more powerful. And so our aspiration is to be in the 2028 LA Olympics, and I think it's we're on that trajectory. Like, it's not impossible for us to achieve that. Right. We're making all the baby steps and getting the validation and the credibility amongst the highest promoter of sport, the IOC. And so I think what we represent for them is a pathway to innovation for the IOC. They have to think about virtual. They have to think about how you can reach more people. They have to think about how the Olympic brand needs to be more accessible to a much wider audience, to the gamers, to the youth, right? And I think Zwift sort of checks a number of boxes there. We're accessible, we're affordable, our values are consistent. We're talking about bringing sport to the masses, and we make, globally, it doesn't matter. You just need an internet connection and a bit of kit, right? So from mass participation events, which is what the Olympic virtual series is about, to an Olympic event is just a real powerful message for us as a brand.
The vision certainly makes sense, right? In terms of what Nike has done. We've talked about it as this kind of a trickle-down health model where you get in kind of the tip of the spear, and then these innovations that we see at the highest end make their way into the broader consumer market. And even like heart rate monitoring, like that's how it started for elite Olympic athletes, and now it's in every wearable and device everywhere. Normal people are tracking it every day. What have the conversations been like with some of the Zwift athletes who maybe are traditional road competitive cyclists, and now we're talking about, hey, you could be in the Olympics in this virtual racing series? They excited about that? Maybe even kind of anxious about what could become of it?
Absolutely. I mean, there are, let's call them specialists. There are Zwift specialists. And they dream about being the national champion. They dream about being the world champion. They dream now about being an Olympic champion, because to be the first Olympian to win, an event for the first time, you make the history books, right, by doing that. So there are athletes out there who probably, I'm just making this up, but there are athletes out there who can be super competitive, the highest level, and hold down a job and have a family, right? They don't have to make the sacrifices that traditional athletes have to make. That's a whole huge pool of people who can now compete. And we see this. I'm like, who are these people competing at the highest level, especially on the women's side? They're not professional athletes. They're like, moms. They've had 3 kids, and clearly they're talented, right? And they're committed. They wake up at 5 a.m. and they train before they have to do everything else that they have to do during the day. So we're creating opportunities for people like that. It's super exciting.
That's amazing. Yeah. And then on the flip side, I was just curious, what are those conversations like with the Olympic Committee? And is it pitching them? Is it convincing? Is it going through I'm sure it's a lot of maybe all of these things, like the technical considerations that go into it. How are you kind of moving this along in those conversations?
Yeah, so it's a collaboration. So at the UCI, which is obviously linked to the IOC. We work with Michael Rogers. I don't know if you know who that is, but he's a former professional. He runs innovation within the UCI. So working really closely with them and collaborating, how do we turn this into a new discipline? It is a new discipline. It's in the constitution of the UCI, and so it's an official sport now, official discipline of cycling. And so we've held the first World Championships, and we'll hopefully hold many more all the way to the Olympics, and hopefully we'll have a series, and we host series events called the Zwift Racing League. But we expect to that eventually the UCI will have sanctioned events that covers the whole calendar and just bring more people into the sport, right? So the conversations with the UCIs has been collaborative. We did a lot of the pushing early on, but now that it's in the constitution, and this is how the UCI sees a path to growing the cycling, the sport of cycling, and bringing more people into the sport, and this is consistent with the Olympic movement and what they want to do with their brand. So it's all laddering up, and it's getting the attention, and we don't have to do as much pushing. Now we're just supporting. They're driving because they clearly have an agenda now.
It works, right? It's working, and both sides can kind of see how we get there. It will be super exciting to follow. So as we wrap up here, and we'll actually get you out of here on this, kind of put you on the spot a little bit. You talked about the hardware coming, also mentioned Zwift supports running now, but there's been conversations about rowing. What can we expect in terms of timing on hardware, and maybe even some of the modalities that are coming up?
Yeah, so we've had to put the brakes on rowing, and we actually had a working prototype. We're super excited. But the truth is that the opportunity and the size of the market of cycling is so big that we felt that doing anything else would be dilutive to that goal. And we talk about this internally, which is like we need to earn the right to do something else.
Sure.
We need to get this one, like really, get it down and make sure it's in cruise control before we say, let's start working on the next modality. It's all there. I mean, it's just a matter of time, and it's a matter of priority for us. But expect us as a company and as an objective and vision. We're not a cycling company. We're a fitness company. There's nothing in the brand that says we're a cycling company. It's just we started with cycling. In fact, we thought about starting with running, but cycling just had more mechanics that were really interesting. Whether it's drafting, you can do it longer than running, right? You can. It's easier. It's low impact. So this is why we started with cycling. But our goal is to explore other modalities because I think it's just a matter of time that you create these virtual worlds where you can do all sorts of things.
And in terms of a bike or a trainer focusing on cycling, is it a 2021 goal to have something out there, or even putting a timeline on it at this point, knowing that you want to get this right in terms of the opportunity?
Yeah, put it this way: we have other modalities in our R&D bucket, so where there's no timeline defined, but we have a budget to explore because right now for the foreseeable future, cycling is so important that we get that right. And there's just a lot of exciting innovation that we think we can unlock with cycling. Cycling is it's the sweet spot for sure. I think even as we open up other modalities, I still think cycling will be the home run.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much opportunity there. It's something that we'll certainly be following along with. I know folks are kind of anxiously waiting to see how it evolves. For anyone who is interested in following along, what's kind of the best way either to, stay up to date or even try Zwift?
Well, Zwift.com. You can come to Zwift.com and try Zwift. We have a great companion app that goes with the game where you can find just, thousands of events that are on offer all the time. And then all you need to do is literally do a Google search. And there's so many, tribes out there and influencers who are creating content or sharing knowledge about how to Zwift or what Zwift is and, how to get the best out of Zwift. There are dozens of community-led websites. This is the part of the business plan I did not expect.
Right.
But it's just rich with content out there. ZwiftInsider.com is another one. There's a Zwiftcast podcast. It goes on and on.
It's really fantastic. And I appreciate you taking a few minutes today to share it. I'm certainly excited for listeners to tune in and hear this. So thanks so much, Eric, for joining us today.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Thanks everyone for listening to today's episode. For more from Fit Insider, visit insider.fit.co and subscribe to our weekly newsletter for insights and analysis on the business of fitness and wellness. Then go ahead and subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. See you next time.